and I eventually plan on being on the Black Student Union.
Excellent. We're so excited to have you, and having student voice is very important, as we all know, and so we are just happy to have you. So if I can go ahead and add some of the other council members, Kumar, bring some of that energy again. If you could introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. Hey, what's up? Tara just showed up. Sorry. I'm Kumar Rashad. I'm a high school math teacher at Breckenridge Metropolitan High School. I also teach developing Black historical passions in the district for close to 20 years. And I don't know at this point, let's see if I make another 20. Doubt it. But I love it here, though. Okay. That's it.
All right. Let me give Mary and Phyllis and Miss Fagan go, please.
Hi, I'm Mary Barnes. I am a counselor at Iowa Middle School.
Hey everybody, I'm Phyllis Clark. I just recently stepped down from my Vice President of Student Services post at Simmons College of Kentucky and just moved to the Council on Post-Secondary Education. We know it as CPE in Frankfort, Kentucky. Glad to be with y'all.
Congrats.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Faye Owens, and I'm glad to say I'm retired. I retired in 1999 as principal of Mill Creek Elementary School. And then I worked maybe 100 days at Atkinson and Coleridge Taylor. And then for 20 years after that, I worked with the Lincoln Foundation as Director of Educational Programs. And I'm glad to see that we have a student on the council. That's it.
All right, thank you. Get Terrence and Tara, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Terrence Sullivan. I am the Executive Director at the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights.
Hello, my name is Tara Walker. I am ECE resource teacher. Well, I was. I am now the ECE implementation coach at Frost Sixth Grade Academy. I sit on several boards. I'm the executive officer for JCTA as well as the co-chair for the Kentucky Alliance Against Racist and Political Oppression. But I am here as JCTA today.
Congrats on your new role as well. All right. We have some staff that have joined us. Of course, everyone knows Abdul keeps us all together and working and functioning. Abdul, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to be here. Just letting you all know that we're live streaming right now on YouTube. So, but I'm glad to see you all.
Great. And Miss Wright.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Wright, and I am new to the district. I work in the General Counsel Office. I'm the Assistant General Counsel for Compliance and Investigations. Here to provide any support for any legal questions that come up.
All right. Okay, so I know that Dr. Ellison and his team know they have some people that have to leave early, so we're gonna hold off on some of the old business and let them go ahead and start with their presentation. And if we could just, if you can hold off with your questions to after the presentation, and just make notes, or you can write them in the chat. And also, we will ask Dr. Ellison and team if you could try to say what. If there's this tendency for us to use a lot of acronyms, and so if we can please just say what those are whenever possible, or if someone else could point those out, that would be great. Okay. Let's see if I can figure out this hosting thing.
Click their arrow in the chat under more, and then you can switch to make host.
Yes, it switched up on. Okay, let's see if there you go. All right. Does it work?
Possibly.
All right.
You have my slides?
Yes. Everyone see the slides? Thumbs up.
All right, we're good then. So good evening, everyone. As Delquan said, my name is Joe Ellison. I am privileged to serve as the Assistant Superintendent of High Schools for JCPS. I have served in this role since July of this year, and prior to that served as an Executive Administrator of high schools, directly supporting our magnet alternative and choice schools. So my two compadres this evening are the other two pieces of our high school zone leadership team, and I'll let them unmute and kind of introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll jump into our talk for this evening. Kim?
I was wondering, I was like, are we going to unmute at the same time? So I'm Kim Morales. I have been a JCPS employee for 21 years, JCPS grad. I'm a homegrown girl, and started as an English teacher at Seneca and then J-Town. Then was tapped to be an assistant principal at Seneca and then the principal. And then came on over to central office where previous assistant superintendent Christy Rogers hired me as an executive administrator. And so Dr. Ellison was my partner for a little bit, and now he's my boss. And I get to directly support and serve and supervise 15 academies of Louisville high school principals and their teams.
Thank you, Kim. I'm Heather Benfield, and I am the newest member to the team as an executive administrator, honored to serve the MAC schools, our Magnet Alternative and Choice schools. And I'm also a JCPS graduate and proud to be as well. And I taught high school science and then had the fortunate opportunity to work with and for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in high school redesign, and specifically serving underserved students who were first-time generation high school graduates or first-time generation college goers in their families. And then I had the opportunity to become a principal and was a principal for 8 years before coming back. That was out of state, before coming back to JCPS and serving in our accountability and research and system improvement division. And now I'm lucky and fortunate and honored to serve on this team with high school zone. So, Joe?
Yeah, so I'm the outsider on the team. I was born and raised in Cincinnati, and after graduating from Cumberland College, which is now University of the Cumberlands, I taught in Owensboro, Kentucky, before coming to JCPS in 2006. And when I came into JCPS, I was an assistant principal, served at Fern Creek, was a principal intern at both Valley and Atherton over the course of 1 year, was an assistant principal at Southern, and then an assistant principal at Seneca, before taking a principalship out of county in Shelby County at Martha Land Collins High School, before returning back to the district as an executive administrator and now assistant superintendent. So you definitely hear a variety of experiences on our team. Two of us born and raised in Louisville, one of us not, but we've all served in various capacities, and we think we bring a pretty diverse skill set as a team to the table, which takes me really to our first kind of slide, which is our JCPS Vision. This is a piece that is quoted by our Board of Education at the beginning of every board meeting. It hangs in Stewart Auditorium. It's embossed on district products, and it really points us really as a North Star. That we work really to graduate prepared, empowered, inspired students who will reach their full potential and contribute as thoughtful, responsible citizens of our diverse and shared world. And I think it's really important for us as high school leaders to keep in mind that district vision, because that district vision guides the work of our entire district. So we know So thinking about that broader lens, that Jcps Vision, those 3 pillars, and the 6 systems, we worked about a year ago to develop a zone mission statement, because we feel like while that Jcps Vision is our North Star, it's very important for all of us in the high school zone to have a laser-like focus on a mission that drives our work every day. And I always warn people when I bring up this mission on a slide that it's a lot of words. So I'm going to condense it in a second. But there are a couple words that are really important to me as an educator and to us as a leadership team. And so our mission is that we work together. And by together, we mean folks at central office, as well as our principals, assistant principals, counselors, and even our teachers, to ensure that students are engaged in equitable and relevant learning experiences with data-driven systems of support in a positive, safe, and inclusive learning environment so that all students graduate transition ready. I was an English teacher, an English major, so I key in on words very specifically. The first word that always stands out to me in that mission is the word ensure. That our job as leaders is to ensure that our students have what they need, not just for now, but for the future. I always argue that the most important day for our seniors is the day after graduation. That when their feet hit the floor that next morning, do they have a plan for the rest of their lives? And the other word that always stands out to me in that mission is the word all. As an English teacher, having studied a couple foreign languages, I know that the word all always means all. And so if we're not thinking about all of our students as we make decisions and as we work to provide support and instruction, then we are failing all of our students. And so our job is really to ensure that all of our students get what they need to be successful now in school, but also in life. And so we tease that all those words down to really one phrase, our mission in one phrase, that we exist to provide relevant, engaging instruction so that students can build a life. I always talk about a 4+2 or diploma plus philosophy. And it's the simple idea that students have to have more than just a diploma in order to build a life. The days of being able to graduate high school and get a job that pays a living wage with just a diploma are long gone. Students have to have 2 years of something else. Now, one thing that we are very careful to tell all of our students is that you don't necessarily have to go to college, but you have to go on to further your learning in some way, shape, or form. So we have students who graduate academic ready. They've met ACT benchmarks. They have taken dual credit courses. And so they have demonstrated they have an academic aptitude that will carry them through pursuit of a 4-year degree at a 4-year institution. Some of our students graduate and go on to earn an associate's degree in an area, JCTC or BCTC or whatnot, which is fair, 4 years plus 2 years of additional study. Some of our students earn an industry certification while they're with us, and so they graduate with a diploma and an industry certification that says they can go right out into the world of work and apply those skills directly and begin to earn a living wage immediately. For us, it doesn't matter which path students take. We just want to ensure that they are on a path. And so our work on the high school, at the high school level, is to ensure that students are receiving instruction that prepare them for whatever that next step may be. And so when we talk about relevant, engaging instruction, our whole goal is to make sure that students are crafting a path for themselves after high school so that whether they choose 4-year degree, 2-year degree, world of work, they are credentialed and they are prepared to mark out the path that is before them. Kim and Heather are going to spend a little bit of time talking about our types of schools, and then Kim is going to talk a little bit about what school feels like right now, because for most of us, life is very different in 2021 than what it was in 2019 or early 2020. And that is a fair statement for our schools as well. So we're going to spend some time unpacking that and then come back and talk about some of the racial equity work we want to highlight that's currently happening in our high schools. And then from there, we'll be able to take your questions. So Kim, Heather, I'll shift to you.
Thank you, Dr. Ellison. So as I mentioned earlier, I support the Academies of Louisville High Schools. And so there are 15 of these schools, and they are career-themed learning communities. So on the slide there are a couple of examples: aviation, health sciences, engineering, manufacturing, culinary. We have medical pathways in just about every one of our Academies of Louisville schools. And these pathways are chosen in collaboration with Kentuckiana Works and GLI and our workforce data. So what are the needs of our community? And student interest and access. So we try to merge those things together and ensure that a student has access to a variety of pathways in a variety of sectors that meet workforce needs and that are equitably accessible to students despite where they may live in JCPS. And what the Academy schools do, what the model does, is basically form teams of adults around cohorts of kids. And so these teams, called Academy teams, are centered on the student's interest. And so if I'm an aviation student at Shawnee, then I have a team of adults around me, a math, English, science, social studies teacher, plus my aviation teacher, and then health or PE or whatever other, world language, whatever electives I'm taking. And we work as a team of adults to support the student with their career interest or passion at the center of that work. Math, English, science, and social studies teachers work to connect to those students' interests to help make learning more relevant and engaging. And the Academy structure works to ensure that all students graduate with a Diploma Plus, as Dr. Ellison mentioned earlier. So students in Academies of Louisville schools are prepped through a 4-course sequence that and supported by a team of adults to graduate on time and to graduate with a Diploma Plus an industry certification, some type of dual credit, or passing an end-of-program exam. Having these opportunities for them allows them to enter the workforce at a higher than average wage because they have more experiences or an industry certification that makes them more competitive than someone who does not. Or they go into college or a 2-year program or whatever their plan is with more learning and experiences under their belt. For some students, that's simple. For example, a student I had at Seneca, she was in the pre-law pathway. She did 4 years. She got experience in courtrooms. She got to do some trips to a law firm. She presented cases at a state competition. And at the end of it, as we were practicing for graduation, she said, "I'm so glad I did this because I now know I do not want to be a lawyer." And she was going, like, her whole plan was, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to be a lawyer. And she had told her family that for years. And so she saved her family a whole lot of money by figuring out that was not what she wanted to do. But she picked up a lot of skills in the preparation, and it kept her engaged in the day-to-day work of high school and was more relevant for her. And the key to the Academies, or one of the keys, is our business partner connection. So that's what really makes the Academies model unique. Some people will compare the Academy structure to like middle school teams, if you're familiar with that at all. But the major difference here is that we are connected to business partners, major business partners in our community: Norton's, UPS, GE Appliances, and then even down to just small law firms or businesses that don't have a lot of employees, but they are dedicating some type of time and talent to our students. And they sign on as official partners, and then they work collaboratively with staff at the schools, an academy coach at each school, the teams of teachers, and the students to ensure that there is a merger of interest and opportunity. It goes beyond guest speakers and field trips. We've had students hired at Masonic homes as CNAs. We've had students hired at GE Appliances. We've had students who have built pathways into YUM and now work at the IT desk at YUM through these partnerships. So it really is a way to meet community workforce needs, but then to also help school learn how to be more relevant and what's happening in the world and how to connect kids to their community and more adults in a more positive way. And then Heather serves our MAC schools.
Thank you, Kim. Yeah, so our magnet alternative and choice schools are schools that also have career pathways. It's going to look different than the Academies of Louisville that Kim described, but these schools have career pathways. They are more specific around magnet interests. And so what that might look like is a theme curriculum or an innovative curriculum that is specific to the magnet that the school serves. And so that's going to be based on student interest. And then our alternative and our choice schools are in that group as similar in the sense that they have a specialized learning environment to serve the students that are attending there, and then specifically and potentially creating environments through examples like big picture learning, where the students have internships that are triangulated with a project they're working on, and also the career business partnership that is embedded in their project. So our 12 high schools that serve students in these, whether it's career pathway or whether it's the theme interest curriculum or specialized learning environment, our magnet, alternative, and choice schools, along with our academies of Louisville, give students in JCPS a wide variety from which to choose to best meet their need, so that we're serving every student with relevant, engaging instruction so that they graduate ready for their life and whatever that looks like through their career, through their certifications, and through their college experiences. So I know that Kim is going to walk us through what it looks like now in schools. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Kim.
Thanks, Heather. So, so far, the great news is, as Dr. Ellison mentioned, we have been entrenched in schools over the last 3 weeks doing some principal coaching, but we are regularly in schools, visiting classes, walking hallways, talking with staff, observing meetings. And what we are seeing is that a vast majority of our students are in class, happy to be there and engaged. And they are interacting with teachers. And yes, they have masks on, but they're doing group work and they are asking questions, and teachers are doing cool stuff with manipulatives and hands-on experiences. And it's all the things that we long for when we did not have access to kids in classrooms. And so that is a beautiful thing. Teachers are teaching. They are working so hard. And it feels really good. If you take the mask away and you go into a classroom, it feels like a school, but better, because there is a greater sense of appreciation, I think, for the learning that can take place in person with the magic of the teacher versus trying to do everything through a screen. And then, Joe, if you'll click the next slide for me. But it is not school as normal. It is not school as what we normally experience. And we certainly are seeing some challenges that are complex and new. And I tease a little bit and say the next time we have a global pandemic, we'll be really prepared. But this is tough new work on top of tough work. And I think our teachers and our administrators and our district leaders have done what they can to learn as much as possible from the NTI period and make normal school better. But then we've had to also learn some new things. So contact tracing, those pictures that are on there, these are pictures from principal offices. On the left-hand side, there's a tray, and one pile is students that need to be contacted, another pile is students where we've left messages, another pile is where we've gotten a hold and the parent is aware that the student needs to quarantine, or whatever that message may be specific to contact tracing. Then on the other side, I think that is a board showing coverage for administrators who are supporting the Healthy at School efforts. And so these are things you would not have seen in a principal's office, 2 years ago. Yes, there are learning gaps, and we have seen that we had some kids who were just completely disengaged, and they were just waiting to come back to school. I actually had a kid say that. I was at Iroquois High School, and a young man said to the principal when I was standing there, "Yeah, y'all kept calling me, but I just knew I needed to get back in here." He was just waiting to get back in. And then we had kids who, struggled to get their technology for a little bit, or maybe didn't learn as quickly, or felt, like they couldn't keep up. So there are definitely some learning gaps that our teachers are working to address. And there's contact tracing. I mentioned that, right? Behavior. I'm sure you've seen headlines. The behavior always makes the news. Unfortunately, the great stuff rarely gets clicked on or picked up. But yes, we have definitely had some major behavior challenges in our schools. Our students were, a lot of them were living including my own children, were living a much more unstructured life as moms and dads continued to try to work. And they were oftentimes, kind of on their own, fending for themselves. I know my own 18 and 15-year-olds have this phone in their hand all the time, and they had it in their hands all the time for about 18 months. And really, there wasn't much reason not to, right? They could, I mean, a lot of them could kind of keep up, plug in, do what they need to do, work at their own pace. And so it was just a totally different environment. And even as adults, I mean, I don't know if you all are feeling it, but when I left my home office and went back into the real office, it was like, oh my gosh, traffic. Oh my gosh, like I got to fix the back of my hair now. It's like some of these little things that really are just inconveniences. So there's everything from that to major trauma, families, kids who have suffered death, suffered eviction, spent way too much time with people that they shouldn't be spending time with unsupervised. And so there's just definitely an uptick in some of the behaviors, whether it's just, I can't sit still, or I've been brewing some stuff with you for about 18 months and now I know how to find you, right? And so those are some real challenges that our schools are doing the best they can to handle. Quarantine procedures, talking with parents, explaining ever-changing guidelines to parents who are never happy about it. Mental health, mental health and trauma that our families have experienced, and trying to make sure that our students have what they need. Did I mention contact tracing? And then staffing shortages, right? So like today alone, and it's only Thursday and Fridays are generally worse, we had about 166 unfilled sub jobs. So what that means is that teachers who are there pick up extra class coverage. Principals, assistant principals, instructional coaches are in classrooms covering classes, making sure students continue to learn and are safe and supervised. But when they're doing that, they're not doing what they would have normally been doing, right? And so it is a real impact. Student attendance, teacher attendance, these things are real struggles. And in our principals meeting this week, we actually, Dr. Ellison led a deep dive into supporting adults. And as we are learning more about the impacts of this COVID period on, on your mind and your mood and also capacity, we are asking educators to do things they've never done before in very challenging conditions. And even our most resilient educators are finding a mismatch between capacity and what they're being asked to do. So how do I do all of these things in a new way when I really haven't had any new training or new support? And so these are real challenges. Despite that, though, you walk into a classroom and it's like, man, this feels good. So teachers are special people, that's for sure. And then I think I've got one more slide. So yeah, so we push through, right? We push through because we have a sense of urgency. We have a mission. We are on a mission that Dr. Ellison talked about earlier. And we know that this work matters, and that's why we get up and we show up every day, because the lives of our students truly do depend on us, whether it's their post-secondary plan or the mental health or the physical resources that we provide to our students. So we definitely feel that sense of urgency more than ever. And amidst all of that, we continue to do normal school or pick up on the goals that we had before COVID. Dr. Ellison, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kim and Heather. So I come back to this phrase because amid that entire context, right, and everything that we feel happening in our community right now, we have an uptick in violence. We know our kids have an increased access to weapons from the 18 to 24 fairly unstructured months. But we also know our kids still have passions. They still have dreams. They still have goals. And so we're still in a position as educators where we're called to feed that. Like, there's a moral imperative on us to try to make school happen in such a way that our kids come because they're connected. They come because they see that sense of relevance, and they come because they know we can help them build that path to something different and something better. So I want to dive in a little bit and talk about some racial equity work examples. We're going to show you a couple images of some things as we go. But I want to start first with an honest revelation that we have a firm commitment to racial equity. My doctoral degree is in educational equity and social justice. And I am blessed to sit in a role where I can work to influence leaders from that lens. And so it doesn't escape me that anytime we're in a conversation about plans or about budgets or about staffing or about overall changes in our district, I'm asking equity questions because it's important to me to make sure that we have considered, again, all of our students as we are making decisions. And so racial equity is such an important piece of our work that A, it's one of our district pillars, but B, it's a part of our bi-weekly leadership meeting with our principals. There's not a principals meeting that gets past us that we don't have a conversation about equity. And sometimes it's racial equity, sometimes it's gender equity, sometimes it's about inclusion. So we take a broad look at equity, but we work to support our leaders in shaping mindsets and practices around equity. I think one of the best things DEP, Diversity, Equity, and Poverty, has ever done in our district was push us to dive into book studies and push leaders to sit with their administrative teams and study books and have conversations about the text, and also have conversations about how the principles in the text can be applied in their current setting. And so we lean on those books in conversations as we do school visits, as we have coaching conversations with our leaders, but we also work to dig deeply in our leadership meetings with our principals to make sure we are helping, again, to foster both mindsets and practices that lead to equity. Second thing I want to start off mentioning is some work around hiring. And I think one of the largest critiques of our district over time has been the absence of teachers who often look like portions of our demographic. I think Kumar would agree that in working in high schools, you do not see a lot of Black administrators or Black teachers. And so there's been a concerted effort in our district over the last few years to change that. There's been a concerted effort among the high school zone to shift that as well. And there are times where we do not have minority candidates for positions. We just don't. We post a position and it runs for a month, and we pull, the list of who's eligible, and there's not a minority candidate on it. And so what we've also coached our leaders to begin to do is to probe for equity in their questioning. So as you are interviewing, ask questions that get to the heart of whether or not those candidates have an equitable mindset. So you may not be able to hire a candidate that is a minority, but you can hire individuals that operate from an equity mindset. And so we've worked with Dr. Stephanie White, who's our diversity hiring specialist in the district. She works out of DEP's office to support our leaders in developing questions and question stems that probe for equity. We've also pushed our leaders to ensure that their hiring committees have a diverse makeup, so that the people who are actually asking those questions represent the demographics of the schools in which they are leading and serving. And so we're making some major headway when it comes to equitable hiring, not just in who's at the table doing the interviews, but also in how we're asking questions around equity itself. Heather, I'll pass to you. No, I won't. I'm going to take this one. I'm sorry. We made a change earlier today. So the EMPTY. Here's that acronym, Delquan. So EMPTY stands for the Equity Monitoring Progress Protocol. And so EMPTY is a tool that DEP has developed to help our schools monitor their work around 6 different domains of work. Now, I show you this image, not because you can really read the text, but I want you to observe colors. This is data from our high schools, 27 high schools, from spring. And what we see in this data is growth. Let me tell you how I know there's growth. Because there's less red and yellow in this depiction than the previous. Red tells us there was no change in status on that particular domain. So take domain 1, for example. It focuses on diversity in curriculum, instruction, and assessment. So those first 3 columns deal with curriculum, instruction, and assessment. When we think about the work that schools are currently engaging in, we took a hard pivot after our situation with Breonna Taylor in Louisville. And we really looked in the mirror and had to ask some tough questions about really whether or not our curriculum and our instructional practices reflect this majority-minority school district in which we work. And so our leaders started digging in. The fourth column, which is domain 2, is professional development. You'll see that's almost all blue, which is embedded. So when Breonna Taylor went down, we had to start digging in about A, how we support our leaders in leading in a more equitable way, but B, how do we support our teachers in teaching in a more equitable way? And so what this shows us is that, yes, we do have some room for improvement. We recognize that, but we are making growth. Because the previous chart, if I had shown that to you, would have been a whole lot of yellow and then some red. And now that we've got a good chunk of blue hanging out in PD and a lot of green everywhere else, tells us that we're doing some good work in making that pivot toward ensuring equity, as John Marshall would say, is fibrous, that it's a part of everything that we do in our schools, not just with our students, but also with our teachers. And so we continue to capture this data in an ongoing way. Our schools link the evidence over time, over the course of the year, to their particular empty document. And then there's a firm assessment in April of every school year to determine where schools are in relationship to their quality of practice. Feedback is given, and then we, as the high school leadership team, coach around that feedback. We provide ongoing support throughout the year. We lean on colleagues, peers, and DEP to provide that support to our schools. So, clear focus on helping our leaders build mindsets and practices that are equitable, clear focus on hiring in an equitable way, and then also a clear focus on knowing where we are in practicing equity, knowing where we're strong, knowing where we still need to grow, and then working to provide additional support as needed. Now I will pivot to Heather.
Thank you. Yeah, and so just to add to what he's saying in terms of that clear focus on professional development, a clear focus on hiring, we're going to just lean into a clear focus on learning and what our students are learning in schools. And so what I'm gonna speak about is the increase in Afrocentric course enrollments, specifically looking over the last 2 years in terms of school years, 1920. We offered 4 courses looking at African American literature, studies, and then in different levels in terms of 4 courses. And then adding to that in last year, we continued that in 2021, but added to the study for Pan-African studies, also developing Black historical consciousness, civil rights in America. So adding to what we had in terms of literature, studies, but then expanding to African history, developing Black historical consciousness, civil rights in America, and Pan-African studies. So now offering those 5 in this school year, 21-22. In addition to offering, in terms of increasing offerings, we've also seen an increase in enrollment. So 1,591 students were taking these courses in our 1920 school year. During last year, which was really that non-traditional instruction year, we still saw an increase, 1,629 students. And then this current year, we're at 2,100 students in course enrollments in the courses I just listed. So really speaking about that push, not just in what the adults are doing, but what students are learning and what students are doing in classrooms and learning about. In addition to the Afrocentric course enrollments and additions we've made, but also enrollments we've seen increase, we've also had a strong push in our dual enrollment and our dual credit. And so in terms of, if that's a term you already know, then awesome. If it's not, I'll just say briefly, it's really the opportunity to take a course at the college level and receive dual credit. So you get credit for the high school class, whether that's an English 3 or an English 4 class, and you get credit for English 101 at the college level. And so we've had an intentional push for increased access and opportunity. And really you can see that last year, well, let's start with this year, 1,840 students enrolled in 2,248 dual credit courses this fall, compared to the entire school year last year of 2,936 students overall. So you see we're on track to pass that number that we had last year. Specifically breaking it down for you, 409 Hispanic students enrolled this fall compared to 417 total all last school year. And then 1,109 Black students enrolled this fall in dual credit classes compared to 1,261 of all last school year. And as we look at the percentages and what that looks like in terms of dual credit this fall, you can see how that breaks out. Now, overall enrollment data is 37% Black students, 43% white students, 11% Hispanic students, and 8% other. So as we think about learning, knowing that students who take and pass a dual enrollment class and have college credit before age 24, they're more likely to go back and finish. And what that means is as our students are being exposed but have access and have opportunity to take those classes, they're more likely after high school to go back and finish for a certificate, a degree, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really exciting to see the numbers growing in our dual enrollment classes. Joe's going to talk about how in the learning realm, how teachers are looking at planning for the learning environment. Joe?
Thanks, Heather. So, one of the tricks in all of this, because we talk about educational tricks and tools, is how do we plan specifically for that sense of diversity. So we talked about the fact that we've seen some growth both in curriculum instruction and assessment. And part of that comes down to the use of the tools that DEP, Diversity, Equity, and Poverty Department, provide us. One of the big tools, here's another acronym, Delquan, is the R tool, the Affirming Racial Equity tool. And what that tool is designed to do, it's broken down into 6 sections, and it's really designed with prompting questions to guide teachers through conversation to ensure that a couple different things are happening. One is that the curricula that we choose to use for instruction, helps students who are minorities see themselves in the content. I was an English teacher, so I'll give you this example. Teaching English standards with a Shakespearean play. There are some kind of go-to Shakespearean plays. Midsummer Night's Dream, Hamlet, Macbeth, Julius Caesar. And all of us have probably read one or more of those in our schooling. The challenge I always gave to my colleagues as an English teacher in Owensboro, Kentucky, was why are we not reading Othello? Which positions an African Moor, a black man, as the central character of the text. And we can cover the exact same standards and teach to the same depth with the same rigor using Othello as I do Hamlet, Macbeth, Julius Caesar, Midsummer Night's Dream. In fact, I can probably dig a little deeper because there's a little more relevance in Othello to our kids than in those other texts. So part of that Affirming Racial Equity tool would prompt teachers to ask questions about whether or not students see themselves in the text. The other thing that tool helps teachers do is to think about what we call windows. So seeing yourself in the text would be a mirror. I see myself just like I would my reflection in a mirror. There's also the opportunity then to create windows where students who may not be minority students can be better enabled to understand perspectives and cultures that are different from themselves. And that's what we call a window. They're actually able to see out from themselves to something that may be different. And so that's just one example, of those tools and how teachers use them to try to plan intentionally to ensure there's more equity in the instructional work that happens in the classroom. A couple other things, and then we'll wrap up. So another one I want to mention are the affinity groups that have developed in our district over time. There was a strong push at the start of last school year. Greg Van, who is one of Delquan's colleagues in DEP, led an initiative around beginning Black Student Unions, BSUs. We had a history in our district of other affinity groups like Men of Quality, which focused on building and shaping African American young men into men. And Kumar Rashad runs a Men of Quality group over at Breck Metro. We also have groups like Women of Worth that do similar for African American young ladies. But we didn't have one that really brought those two genders together. And so the BSU became an opportunity to bring students together, A, to celebrate cultural heritage, but B, be able to encourage students to live that cultural heritage out loud, to be proud of it, and to really build a deeper sense of belonging for our minority students within their schools. When you look at our comprehensive school survey data that our district gathers annually, you'll see that over time, as students progress by grade level, their sense of belonging or sense of affiliation in school typically decreases. And what you also see is that across the grade levels, our African American students typically have a lower sense of belonging than our white students. So it's important for us to build connection while they are at school. So we tackle two things. One is that social sense of connection through affinity groups, but then through our instruction, through career technical education pathways, through the academy models, through more personalized instructional models like big picture learning, also trying to help build a stronger sense of belonging for students. The last thing I'll mention touches on behavior, and specifically our work around out-of-school suspensions. It's no secret that if you dive into district data over the last 10, 15 years, there's a significant disparity in suspension data between Black students and white students. That Black students traditionally were suspended 2 to 3 times more than white students out of school. And so we've owned that data for what it is, and we've worked with our school leaders and their leadership teams to dig deep into that data and to also adjust practice, to add more interventive steps prior to suspensions when possible. What you'll find from early data so far this year, and Kim mentioned headlines earlier, have we had some pretty egregious behavior in our schools coming back from COVID? Yes. But when you look at our behavior data, what you will see is our referral numbers are down. Our in-school removal, or ISAP, is kind of the coined phrase for that. Those numbers are down. And our out-of-school suspension numbers are down. And as we have talked with our school leaders about what attributes to that decrease, what they've told us is we're working hard to work with kids. That our school leaders and our teachers are extending themselves more than they ever have before to try to work through challenges and situations differently. So instead of a Kumar Rashad just writing a referral right away on a Joe Ellison, it might be a nonverbal redirect where he goes and stands next to him and taps on the desk. And then if Joe doesn't get it together, it might be a verbal redirect. And then if Joe doesn't get it together, it might be a hallway conference. And then if Joe doesn't get it together, he might pick up the phone and call mama. And then if that doesn't make it happen, then he might write a referral. So there are these multiple opportunities for students to correct, right? Before a teacher sends a student to an office, which then is going to result in an in-school removal or ISAP placement or an out-of-school suspension, right? So our schools are really attuned now to the fact that our students are bringing in more trauma than ever before, and really trying to work our systems with our mental health practitioners, our family resource youth service center coordinators, our guidance counselors to provide additional support while being attuned to that in the classroom as well and working to be more flexible with our students. So as we have conversations with our leaders about why those numbers are trending down, those are the things they are telling us. And they specifically have suspension reduction plans that they have written focused on key behaviors in their buildings. They're analyzing that data on a monthly basis and adjusting their responses as needed to try to continue to drive those numbers down. Again, we've only been in school a few months. Early data tells us we're doing a pretty good job in bringing those numbers down. We still have room to grow, especially around the disproportionality of suspensions between our Black students and white students, but we are making an intentional effort to swing that data in a different direction. That comes back to the equity mindset of the work and being aware of it and working intentionally to change it. So I'll come back to this last phrase as we close. Again, we have this big district vision that our students are inspired, they're empowered, they're prepared for the next step. We have a high school mission that talks about us ensuring that students receive the education that they need in an environment that values them. And we tease that down into one phrase, that we work to provide relevant, engaging instruction so that students can build a life. Because for us, while high school years are important and graduation day is important, what's most important is the day after graduation. When those feet hit the floor that next morning, do they have a plan for their next steps in life? Do they have an actionable path? And have we prepared them in order to tackle it? So, Delquan, I'll give it back to you. That completes our presentation for tonight.
All right, great job, you all. We really appreciate that. A lot of information. So on that note, I want to open it up for questions. And when you, if you also that this is a time we want to make sure that we give everyone a chance, all the council members a chance to ask questions. So if you could prioritize your question to one question, and then as the opportunity presents itself, you come around, then you can ask another question after some other people have been able to ask some questions, okay? All right.
I'll go ahead and start if you let me. It'll be real quick. I wanted just to point this one, it's inspired by Ms. Morales. So I think it was during your presentation this question came to me. So in order to support students who are creating their own paths, how do we collect data that supports them? You know, what tools can we use to collect data to support students who are creating their own paths that are outside of our normal basic MAPS testing, standardized testing, and so on and so forth? What other tools can we use to help these students, to support students as they create their own self-paths?
So that's a great question. And I'm going to back up just for a second before we get into tools and say that I think before we can apply any tool to help any kid, there has to be some exposure and experience, right? Like you've got to, I can't create a path to a place I don't know how to envision. And so opportunities to explore careers, we just launched the first Explore Academies in middle schools. This year, Ramsey is a leader in that work, but really helping kids in middle school to see what's available out there. So I guess you could say it's like a tool, but it's a program to help kids see beyond what their normal circle of adults do for a living, right? So exploring. Then when we get them into high school, we use a name and need approach. And we put every kid on a chart and we start tracking, yes, all the accountability stuff, right? we do all the MAP testing, we do all those things, we check for grad requirements. And we look at pathways and interests and we start thinking, okay, what does this kid need? How can he get there? And then it's that individualized conferencing, which is so hard in large high schools if you have a high student to counselor ratio. So making sure that our most in need students and our largest schools can have access to counselors is really important, because then you sit down with that kid and you go through the name and need chart and you say, I see you're interested in this. And I know you completed your ILP, which is another acronym, Individual Learning Plan. And your Individual Learning Plan says, that you might have some skills over here. Are you interested in that? And they might say, no, and that's okay. All right, well, you explored some things over here. You had experiences here. You're maybe you're in this pathway, or you went on this field trip, or and so it has to be a combination, I think, Kumar, of making sure we have programs that expose students to options and that we're not limiting them. We found that a lot of our medical pathways are female dominant, right? They're not so much racially different, but they are gender disparate. So making sure that they see that, like, even if that's not my normal perception of a career person or a person in that field, like, it is still possible for me. So the programs that expose students, and then the tools are individualized skill exploration and personalized counseling to help students build those plans. I don't think there is it'd be great if there was something we could put in front of kids and they just map it all out themselves, but they need the guidance of adults. Counselors are our best friends in that work. Academy coaches, teachers, career teachers. So I think I think the tools are simple. It's simply tracking where each kid is and having adults who are responsible for making sure that student has a plan. And then the programs and the experiences really help to fill that plan out. If I'm missing something, Dr. E or Heather, let me know. But to me, it's about the programs and the exposure and then the individualized counseling.
Completely agree. And the only other thing I would add there, Kim, is that, we track every senior and their post-secondary readiness. So the state has a part of our state accountability as high schools, post-secondary readiness. Our goal as a district coming out of COVID is 75% of our seniors graduate post-secondary ready. That's the bar we've set for this year. But within that work, each school has a team that is looking at each senior individually and determining, where they are in pursuing that. Some of our seniors roll into senior year having already earned an industry certification. They're post-secondary ready. They're good to go. But part of that then, when students are not already post-secondary ready, is that counseling piece that Kim mentioned, where people are having one-on-one conversations with students, ensuring they are scheduled appropriately, and ensuring that whatever it is they really want to do with their lives, they're on the quickest path possible to get there. And then us matching specific supports to each student based upon what they need. And that's why we call it the name and need chart, where we're naming each kid, identifying their needs, and then working to provide supports that work to address those needs. So, there's a clear focus on kids 9 through 12 from our zone, but a very intensive focus on our seniors to work to ensure that each of them are ready for that transitional step.
All right, thank you. So next up in this order, we have Ms. Walker, then we have Ms. Clark, and then we'll have Ms. Robinson, and then Ms. Owens.
Thank you. Mine is, I have a statement and along with the question. We were talking about the behaviors, and I believe it was you, Dr. Ellison, that was speaking about the behaviors of the students and how they have escalated. And since, just for the, what 3 months that we've been in school, and just me being a parent and an educator and doing research during the pandemic, they stated that due to the pandemic, kids were displaying defiant behaviors. That was just one issue that I paid attention to because I saw it in my home. And there were several issues with children that research that the study showed were the behaviors in students. But this is just one that I paid attention to. We should have been looking at all of these things that we should have been looking at everything that impacted our students as well as our staff with this pandemic. And we should have addressed those issues because we have these issues with these behaviors. And then we're thinking, okay, we're going to start the school year and it's going to be school as normal. And it has not been. So there were some other things that we should have addressed, especially the mental health issues with our students and staff, as well as the Breonna Taylor movement. And I do believe that there were several, I know there were several educators that was out there in this movement that maybe the district should have reached out to ask them what did they see? Do they have any suggestions of what the district should do before we go to school? Because all we did was come from a pandemic where kids went to school for 6 weeks. And then we had a summer program and then we were back in school and it was business as usual. And that's not how things is happening right now. That's why we're seeing these behaviors in the school. So we need to really address these. So I guess mine is just a statement. We really need to address these issues here before we can really address teaching our kids, because if we don't educate the whole child, reach the whole child, we're not going to be able to reach them academically either.
Ms. Walker, I want to respond to what you said. I do agree that we do have to reach the whole child, that if we don't address the individual inside the student, then the educational side is not going to come along. I will say that we did not walk as a high school zone into this school year blind. We knew that we were going to see some challenges and some struggles with our students. I think it's also fair to say that we didn't know maybe exactly what or to what degree we might see those challenges and those behaviors. So we knew we would see some things. It was hard to predict what exactly and to what degree. However, we did work very targetedly with our school leaders to focus deeply on culture and climate upon return to school. And so much so that we told them, if we come in your building in the first 2 or 3 weeks of the school year and all that's happening is culture building and climate work, we're happy with it. Like, don't dive into narrow standard until you have a strong culture and climate in your building. And those were literally our instructions to our leaders. And in their summer prep with their teachers, they communicated similar. But you have to focus on classroom culture and climate. Building community is one of our key phrases there, to ensure that students are connected to what's happening in the school so that we can teach. Another thing that we did was we liaised with our academic support programs department to really lay out a multi-tier approach to addressing trauma and mental health. Part of that work is our mental health practitioners in school buildings, as well as our guidance counselors. What we've learned over time, and Kim mentioned this, that we have schools across the country that don't have a reasonable student to counselor ratio. 500 to 1, 400 to 1, 250 to 1 is like the national gold standard, but that still seems like a lot. And so adding mental health practitioners to our schools better enabled us to respond to trauma issues and mental health, as well as providing trauma-informed care training to our teachers so that they are better able to spot what I always call the root of behavior. That I feel like sometimes we respond to a behavior, but we don't spend time trying to dig deep to diagnose the root so that we can address the root. Trauma-informed care training helps us better identify the root immediately so that we can support students in addressing it. So there are definitely pieces that are in play in our schools from the start of this year, even from when we returned in a hybrid setting in April of last year, at least at the high school level, it was April right after spring break, to really try to provide a blanketed support to really support the whole child. And so we continue to adjust and adapt those practices over time and continue to lay in new resources as we are able. I do agree with you that we have to address the whole child. And so there's definitely a social emotional element to the work that we are giving great attention, as well as the instructional and curriculum.
Can we have Ms. Clark afterwards?
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for all the information that's been shared. I have a daughter that has just left JCPS and one who is still there. And so what I am paying attention to right now is week after week, I am seeing just even in the Courier Journal, these editorial and opinion pieces about the magnet school. So Dr. Benfield, if you can help me understand how to not necessarily counter, but how to speak intelligently about what we at the district level, how we're handling the information out there around. I mean, I was just looking now and it says magnetic pull on the Courier Journal, an investigation into our magnet schools. And so full disclosure, both of my daughters went to manual. Well, one is still there and the other one just graduated. But these pieces out there that speak to the inequities in some of the magnets, particularly manual, no, and Mazik and the feeders and some of it. How are we handling that? What is the conversation? And how is I, as a parent and a layman and a higher ed administrator and advocate, speak to some of this on your behalf?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I appreciate you bringing it up and asking it. I think that first, big picture here, we are not unique in magnets pulling, if you will, specific students, and I think that it having a microscope, or rather a magnifying glass on it for your journal right now, is something that we probably need to talk about and need to bring up. It's something that is happening, does happen, and it's a good conversation to have. So although I agree that we need talking points to be able to combat and say the whole picture and say the positive pieces too, I just think it's also important to have the dialogue. So part of it is about schools being able to offer specific magnets that will attract, right? So it's a word on purpose, that a magnetic pull is on purpose. And so part of it is like at Central, all of the magnet that they have, right? That all the programs that they offer. And then of course you mentioned manual and the magnet offerings there. And then you have your traditional schools. I went to a traditional school in JCPS, 6 through 12. And so I didn't realize that it was a magnet, but I was attracted to it, right? So I guess it worked. But the point of having the option to have these personalized programs that are really specially designed with the innovative curriculum and not just that, but the career-based curriculums. If you think about the veterinary program or the dance or the journalism programs that are offered. And so I think there's an important piece there. I think the other piece is thinking about that all of our high schools offer pathways, and they might not be called magnet, but they are pathways, right? So if I was in a conversation with somebody at the grocery store who was complaining about it, I would have that in my mind, right? That there were things, or there are things offered at every single school. Every single school has a fantastic pathway offering. It's not just manual, and it's not just one or two schools in Jefferson County, but every single school is doing incredible things, and every school offers interest-based pathways. So I think there's that piece, and then I think in terms of being able to have the choice in terms of opportunities to go to the different programs. And I think sometimes we get stuck on, well, I want math science, or I want traditional, or whatever it is. And the truth of it is that every single school has incredible math being offered, and incredible math teachers. Every single school has those pieces. So that would be my first piece. I do want to offer Dr. Ellison the opportunity to jump in and answer, as he previously worked with the magnet schools and has experience specifically with this group of schools in our area.
Yeah. And then before you start, Ellison, can you speak more specifically, because this is the Advisory Council for Racial Equity, but you can speak more specifically to some of the racial dynamics that Ms. Clark pointed out, please.
For sure. So, what I would say is, we've had magnets in this district for a long time. And, Magnet Schools of America, MSA, is a national organization that has standards of practice, in essence, for magnets that our district has recommitted to trying to meet within our magnets. One of them is that at the core of the initiation of magnets was the idea to build diversity. But Jefferson County has just been a different entity when it's come to implementing magnets. And that may have shifted some over time, which is part of what's highlighted in that reporting. What I will say is that what we have actively done over the last 5 years in the high school zone is work to balance magnets with Academies of Louisville. And what I mean by that is this: we understand that choice is important for students, and we understand that a more personalized education is critical for students. And so it used to be that you had a choice with just magnet, but now with Academies of Louisville, you can live in a network, and among several schools in your network have multiple choices around career technical education pathways that connect to you personally, so that you have a choice in your lane of study and a more personalized learning experience. Very much similar to what students experience in a magnet approach to schooling. So when you look at our high schools in totality, while people may focus just in on magnets, what they may not realize is that with our 15 Academies of Louisville schools, we have similar choice, similar personalization, and similar paths that lead into clear career fields. So my counter to people who only look at magnets is to always ask them to look at everything else that we are working to provide, specifically through that academy structure, and to really investigate the opportunities for choice and personalization there. To Delquan's point about racial diversity, when you look at the data, especially as reported in the CJ, we know there are some challenges at Manual around racial diversity. We don't see as disparate challenges at Male Traditional, for example, but what you do see at Butler is a highly diverse student population. Butler's demographic has shifted drastically over the last 10 years. Still a traditional education, similar to Male, but a highly diverse population. One of the challenges we face in our district, frankly, is our housing patterns, and the fact that we have concentrations of minorities in certain areas and concentrations of wealth in certain areas, which makes it very challenging as a school district to ensure diversity. So then you get into student assignment and all those other things. I am not the superintendent. I'm not walking into that. But what I will say is that our district is engaging in a renewed conversation around student assignment. And you're going to hear more about that over time. And the challenges that we face in trying to ensure that schools are diverse and that students have opportunities to engage with others that are different from them, to learn from them and appreciate them differently. That is a commitment of Dr. Polio, our superintendent, and we are re-engaging that conversation. As that conversation continues, we will continue to remain committed to offering choice and personalization, not just through magnets, but also through the structures of the Academy of Louisville and the particular pathways and opportunities that we provide therein.
Great, thank you. Next, we have Ms. Robinson, and then we'll have Ms. Owens.
Okay, so I do have a whole bunch of questions, but my main concern is, as a Black student, as a Black female student that is in advanced classes, how do I work for others to provide other Black students to get like the higher rigor courses like the AP dual credit if it seems like the educational system has given up on them?
Can I take this one first? I like this question. Tatiana, thank you for asking that question. It's a wonderful question. And let me tell you why I wanted to jump in on this question first, because I was you. Just in Cincinnati. I was that Black kid who was sitting in AP English Lang, AP English Lit, and I was the only one. I was also the Black kid that went to a predominantly white, small, Southern Baptist affiliated college. And in most of my classes, it was just me. So I get it, right? One of the things that we have worked very intensely with leaders on, and this is definitely where you can jump in and help, is building support structures for minority students who are in high rigor classes. That could be AP, Advanced Placement. That could be IB, International Baccalaureate. That could be DC, Dual Credit, right? Those are all high rigor, high level course offerings. And there are several schools that have worked very intentionally to build cohorts of students so that they are locked in together and they're moving together, so you're not by yourself. The second thing is to build relationships between upperclassmen and lowerclassmen. So upperclassmen who are minority students who have been successful in those courses and continue in those courses to connect with minority students who are new to those courses. To help them understand, yes, you belong here. I think that's one of the biggest hurdles for our Black students, specifically in high rigor courses, is that you get in there and you feel like you're the only one and you feel like you don't belong. Or sometimes there's that whole mean girl, mean boy mentality where it's like, where you come from, you don't belong in these classes. Like, you know what I'm talking about. And so you have to have that sense of support from people who have been where you currently are. And those would be those upper class BIPOC students who have walked that path before, who can reach back and provide that support. So where you can chime in specifically at Valley is having conversations with people like Principal Kelly and Assistant Principal Curran, and your counselors, Ms. Gabati, who has a new last name now that I can't remember, to say, hey, we need to build this group where students like me who are upperclassmen who have been successful in these courses can make sure that underclassmen who are new to these type of courses have a connection and a sense of support from us. Because it's one thing for an African American teacher to tell a student that they belong. It's a whole nother thing for a student who is 2 or 3 years older than me, who has walked this path not too long ago, to tell me I belong and I can make it and to stick with it. So one of the best things you can do is simply encouraging your peers to hang with it when it gets tough or when they feel like they don't belong, and then also advocating within your school to build a structure that provides that type of support between upperclassmen and underclass students. Ms. Morales or Dr. Benfield can jump in if they want, but that one touches my soul deeply because I lived it as a student myself.
I am going to jump in just because I love talking to students. I don't get to do that as much in this role. So hi, Tatiana, and I cannot wait to tell Mr. Kelly we're going to be at your school tomorrow, actually, at 10:30, and I would love to say hello to you if we're not interrupting something majorly important like some exam or something. But as a teacher and then as a principal, one of the things that I saw shifting in schools, and that I see more so now than ever, as you notice in our numbers that are increasing, is that more and more school leaders are using data to identify students who may have been overlooked because maybe their attendance was poor, maybe they acted out in class, maybe, I don't fill in the blank, right? And so as a principal, I had a conversation with a counselor and actually changed a student's schedule based on the MAP test, because the MAP test showed significant capacity to do well, but the student's behavior was poor. So the AP teacher or the advanced teacher, was hesitant about that. Like, that's not your typical advanced kid, right? Sit in the seat, do all the work. But this kid clearly had the capacity. So I tell you that story just to tell you that those types of conversations are happening more and more. What does the data tell us? We've got to triangulate that. It can't just be teacher recommendation. That's important, but it can't just be that. We also have to have some academic achievement data. We also have to talk to kids. We also have to have people like you, Tatiana, who are being successful and are saying, you can do this, and being that light that Dr. Ellison talked about. So it does not rest on you to do, but I appreciate the question, and I'm excited to meet you tomorrow.
Is it okay if I ask one more question?
Yeah. Okay, so really quick and the quick answer, because I got Miss Faye. She's waiting in line behind you. So let's get Miss Faye, and then we'll come back to you, Tatiana. All right, thank you. You on mute, Miss Faye.
Okay. Before I ask my question, I'd like to comment on that last question. When you talk about support for kids in the advanced program, you can't leave out the teacher. Teachers need to know how to support these kids, because some of those teachers, my child was in the advanced program, some teachers are not supportive, especially of Black kids being in the advanced program. So there needs to be lots of PD for teachers on how to make kids of color and Black kids more comfortable. That's my statement. My question is this. I am not that. Thank you, first of all. I enjoyed your presentation. I learned a lot about it, and I got a lot of questions, but I just want to ask you this. In the Academy of Louisville, and all those STEAM magnets, I'm not talking about male, I'm not talking about manual, because I got a whole opinion about that, because I used to be coordinator of optional programs way back when. But my question is this. How are kids selected to be in the Academy of Louisville and in those STEAM magnets, not male, not manual, but those other 12 high schools you were talking about in the Academy of Louisville? Because that's new to me.
Thank you for that question. That's a great question. And I didn't say this earlier because I thought Dr. Ellison and Dr. Benfield did a great job of responding to that question. But because I think it's that your question is the crux of Ms. Clark's dilemma a little bit. Like, how do kids get into these programs, and is it accessible to all students, or are there certain barriers maybe for some students? And so I think that's a great question, and one that we are certainly exploring as a district. For the Academies of Louisville, the Academies were built for the reside student. So you can just walk into the school and you can select most of our Academy schools, in fact, all of them except one who does it a little bit differently. All freshmen explore the career academy options within the school, and then they select which pathway they want to go into for sophomore, junior, and senior year. So they just show up. And then they explore and they go. Now, if I'm a kid who, for example, at Seneca, we had an ag program, and that was very popular. And in fact, they just won a big state award. So let's say that I'm not in Seneca's resides, but I'm really interested in that. And I am in Seneca's network. So there's 3 high schools in this zone that I can choose from, and I could select to go to Seneca for the ag program because they are in my network of transportation. And to do that, there were some basic attendance, behavior, and grade requirements, but nothing that would basically a C average, fewer than 10 absences, and no repeated suspensions was the deal there. Now here I'm going to be real honest with you and say those were my requirements as the principal of that school. They might be different in another school, so that's where our district is looking to ensure that these entrance points are equitable across the board. But a majority of your Academy students are just walking in the door and selecting a pathway.
One more quick. Well, I know you don't want to get into this, but that might be difficult with this new student assignment plan. Like for Shawnee, Shawnee, you can only go to the dual reside, and you're talking about maybe 3 schools, but maybe some child does not want to go to those three schools. They may want to go to another one. How would they get into it?
So I'm not going to dive into student assignment, Ms. Owens, but I will say this.
I'm sure, but I just see that as
yes, ma'am. So
that is one of the problems.
So let me say 2 things. One, I know there's going to be open feedback from community stakeholders when all of that student assignment conversation begins. So I would encourage you to make sure your voice is heard in the course of that feedback. The other thing I will say is we've worked hard within Academies of Louisville to ensure that similar pathway opportunities are offered in each network. So we have 3 networks of high schools. And so students within that grouping of schools, or clusters if you want to call it that, to use a more elementary school term, would have access to multiple pathways. So my reside school might be Fern Creek, but there may be a pathway at Moore that I'm really interested in, and because Moore is in my network, I can apply to go to Moore for that particular pathway. So we do have a sense of choice within those networks, so that students still have access and opportunity to multiple things outside of that reside school itself. Okay. You also asked about theme magnets. Theme magnets are going to be different because they function under the district auspices of magnet programs. And so the district structure for application and selection for those magnet programs govern those particular schools. That's part of why we brought on the Academy of Louisville infrastructure. That's why we built that 5 years ago under the leadership of a different Assistant Superintendent, Christy Rogers, and a whole team that went and visited academies of Nashville and Nashville, Tennessee, decided that we could do it and do it a lot better. And we are, frankly, our data shows that, and brought that back so that students in a reside school setting would still have access to different opportunities and also have access to opportunities that would lead to industry credentials, employment, 2-year degree, 4-year degree as well. So we're trying to work to balance some of what currently exists, which you know well from having worked in option and magnet, to ensure that our students still have choice and have a sense of personalization, whether they're in a themed magnet that's governed by the district magnet structure, or they're in a reside school that's an Academy of Louisville school.
So the Academy of Louisville is like an offshoot of the magnet. If you can't get in the so-called magnet, you have a better chance of going to Academy.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. They're not one and the same at all.
Okay.
Academies of Louisville is a function of the high school office, so we oversee that. Okay. Your themed magnets work through the JCPS option and magnet or school choice office. So two different entities. But again, we made the effort to create the Academies of Louisville in these 15 schools, and it wasn't 15 from the beginning. Schools were added over time. But now we're up to 15 of our schools to be able, again, to offer more personalization and choice to students, regardless of where they live or where they're assigned to attend school.
Okay. And so, yeah. And I apologize. I don't mean to cut you off because it's great conversation, a lot of great information. But it is now 7:01. And so we had we tried to stop hard at 7 o'clock. I just want to thank Dr. Ellison and his team for all the hard work that you do. Thanks for being here. What we're going to do, because I know there's a lot more questions, so what we'll do is we'll compile the questions from Acre. Please email me, and then we'll send those on to Dr. Ellison and his team for answers. But we can't thank you enough for just doing the hard work to serve our schools and our students and our families. So we really appreciate that. And because we're at 7 o'clock, what I want to do real quick, because of the hard work of our secretary, Ms. Mary Barnes, if everyone had a chance to review the minutes from the previous meeting, I just want to go ahead and do a vote on those if there's no question. If all those in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Thank you so very much. She's already sent the ones from this meeting that I'll be sending out, and also our next meeting will be in January 20th. And so, but before then, I'll be communicating with everyone. Please look at the emails, and if you have any questions, please feel free to call me. But I want you all to promise me that you do your best to enjoy the rest of your evening. All right?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you all so much.
All right. Great
Great presentation.
Thank you.